It was a cloudy afternoon when I found myself climbing a narrow, winding path up the mountainside, the air thick with mist and mystery. I had traveled far, across cities in silence, to meet the one they called the Zen master. People said he rarely spoke but always answered. I was skeptical, of course. As a professor, I relied on logic, reason, and knowledge, but something in me, maybe restlessness, maybe pride, drove me up that trail, determined to understand the elusive meaning of Zen. The deeper I walked into the mountains, the more I felt something watching. Not eyes, something else. I reached a humble hut just as twilight crept in. It was smaller than I imagined, built from weathered wood and ancient stone, yet it radiated something strange, an energy I couldn't explain. I knocked once, no answer. Then, without warning, the door creaked open on its own. I stepped inside, cautious, heart thumping. The scent of incense filled my lungs. Everything was still, silent, as if the room itself was holding its breath. There he was, the Zen master, sitting cross-legged, as calm as a still lake. No words, just a gesture toward the cushion across from him. I introduced myself, trying to hide my nerves behind formal speech. "I've come to understand Zen," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached behind him and picked up a teapot. Slowly, deliberately, he began pouring tea into a small porcelain cup in front of me. I watched, puzzled. The cup filled quickly, but he didn't stop. He kept pouring, letting the tea spill over, trickling across the table down to the floor. My confusion morphed into discomfort. Then irritation. Was this some ritual? A test? Or was he simply ignoring me? I cleared my throat, then blurted out, "Why do you keep pouring? The cup is full." My voice echoed in the stillness. He looked at me for the first time, his gaze steady, ancient, unreadable. Then he finally spoke. "Like this cup," he said softly, "your mind is full. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The words landed like a weight inside me. I blinked, trying to understand. My mouth opened to speak, but nothing came out. Something about his words felt like a mirror, forcing me to confront what I hadn't expected. Suddenly, everything felt louder. The crackle of the fire, the dripping of the tea, even the sound of my own heartbeat. I was used to being the one with the answers, the authority in the room. But now, I was the student, and not a very good one. I realized I had brought more than curiosity to that room. I had brought ego, expectation, and assumptions. I had come with a full mind, not ready to receive, only to confirm what I thought I knew. The silence in the room stretched, but it wasn't empty, it was full of meaning. He didn't lecture me. He didn't criticize me. He simply waited. It was then that I understood this wasn't about tea or words or rituals. It was about surrender, letting go of everything I clung to. Knowledge, identity, judgment. I felt embarrassed at first, then humbled. I looked at the spilled tea soaking into the wooden floor and saw my mind reflected in that puddle, cluttered, overflowing, unable to hold anything new. I sat back, breath slowing, thoughts unraveling. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to say, and that felt freeing. The Zen master finally stood and motioned toward a window. I followed his gaze. Outside, the mist had thinned, revealing the vast valley below, trees, rocks, rivers, all still, all simple. "Do you see it?" he asked. "What?" I whispered. "Everything," he replied. And I did. Not through analysis or explanation, I just saw. The world hadn't changed, but I had. I realized I had been living with a veil over my eyes, layered with theories, opinions, beliefs. Now, even if just for a moment, that veil had lifted. I didn't need more knowledge, I needed awareness. As the evening deepened, he poured another cup of tea. This time he stopped before it overflowed. I took it, my hands steadier now. The tea was warm, earthy, and simple. Nothing extraordinary, yet it felt sacred. Not because of what it was, but because of how I received it. In that moment, I began to grasp the essence of Zen, not as something to learn, but as something to experience. Not with a full mind, but an open one. The master smiled gently, and I felt that smile ripple through my chest like a breeze through autumn leaves. I stayed in that hut for what felt like hours. We didn't speak much after that. We didn't need to. The silence became a kind of language, richer than words. I watched the fire, listened to the wind, and let my thoughts pass like clouds across the sky. The mountains outside stood tall and unmoved, just as they had for centuries, and I realized they were the perfect metaphor for Zen. Steady, present, unconcerned with noise, I had come looking for answers in words, but the answer was in the stillness, in the emptiness, in the quiet between the questions. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on a thin mat beside the hearth, eyes open, staring into the shadows dancing along the walls. My thoughts churned, but they didn't bite like before. They floated. I kept thinking about the cup. How many times had I walked through life overflowing, never realizing I was too full to take in anything real? I began questioning everything I believed about myself. Was I truly wise, or just well-informed? There's a difference, and it terrified me. Somewhere between doubt and stillness, I started to feel a crack form in the walls of my certainty. At dawn, I stepped outside. The air was sharp and quiet, the world wrapped in silver fog. Everything seemed new, even though nothing had changed. Birds sang, distant and soft. Trees stood like sentinels, unmoved by my presence. I didn't rush, I didn't analyze. I just stood there, letting the world seep into me without resistance. And it was in that stillness I sensed something more, something beneath the noise of daily life, a kind of rhythm. The Zen master had taught me nothing. And yet I had learned something essential. My mind wasn't empty yet, but it had begun hollowing. He found me by the stream that morning, watching the current twist and glimmer around smooth stones. "Water is always ready," he said quietly. "It doesn't resist, it only flows." I nodded, unsure what to say. Part of me wanted to ask 100 questions, but another part knew the answers would never come through explanation. They had to be experienced, like the cold splash of stream water against my fingers or the way silence settled into the bones. The master placed a hand on my shoulder, and without a word, we began walking deeper into the forest together. The trees grew thicker as we moved, and the path narrowed until it barely existed at all. There were no signs, no direction, only the crunch of our steps and the occasional bird call. I wondered where he was taking me, but I didn't ask. I simply followed, trusting the uncertainty. My old self would have demanded answers, would have protested the aimlessness. Now I found a strange comfort in not knowing. Every step became a lesson in letting go. When we reached a clearing, he stopped. There in the center stood a single stone lantern, moss-covered, weathered, and glowing with quiet wisdom. "This is where I first realized," he said. "Realized what?" I asked. He looked at the lantern, not at me. That everything I needed was already within me, but I had buried it beneath layers of thought, fear, and pride. His voice was calm but carried the weight of countless lifetimes. So I stopped searching outside. I started listening inside. I stared at the lantern, unsure if I understood, but I wanted to. I needed to. The silence returned, and I felt it again, that presence. Not mystical or magical, just truth, raw, quiet truth that exists beyond words or explanations. He began piling stones in a circle. "Help me," he said. I did, unsure why. We spent hours building a ring of stones, not for function, but perhaps for form. Maybe it meant something. Maybe it meant nothing. But as we worked, I stopped thinking. I just moved. I became part of the act, not above it. No judgment, no goal, just the rhythm of hands on stone. When it was done, he smiled. "Zen isn't learned," he said. "It's lived." I finally understood what he meant. Zen wasn't a concept. It was a way of being, of showing up to life. That evening, back at the hut, he handed me a brush and ink. "Write what you've learned," he said. I stared at the blank paper, paralyzed. I had no clever summary, no profound insight. But then I let go. I stopped trying to write something important. I simply moved the brush and let the ink flow like water. The characters formed slowly, honestly. When I finished, he nodded. "Good," he said. I looked down and saw only one word. Nothing. But it didn't feel empty. It felt complete. For the first time, I was proud of something unpolished, unplanned, and true. Days passed, though I lost track of time. I stayed with the master, not as a student, not as a teacher, but as a presence among presences. We gathered wood, cooked simple meals, and watched the stars in silence. And somehow, I began to hear more in the quiet than I ever had in lectures or books. The sound of a crackling fire, the rustle of leaves, even the hush of my own breath. It all became sacred. I had come seeking knowledge. What I found was wisdom. And wisdom, I learned, doesn't fill you up, it empties you completely. Eventually, the day came when I knew it was time to leave. The master didn't stop me, he only offered me tea, one last cup. This time I noticed everything. The warmth, the scent, the quiet care he poured into it. I bowed deeply, with no words to say goodbye. As I walked down the mountain path, everything looked different. Brighter, simpler. And though I carried no scrolls or lessons, I felt heavier with meaning than ever before. I had left behind my old self somewhere between the teacup and the silence, and what I carried now was peace. Now, when people ask what Zen is, I don't try to explain, I simply smile. Sometimes I tell them a story about a cup and a stubborn professor. Sometimes I just sit quietly and listen. Because now I know, Zen isn't something you describe. It's something you feel when you stop trying to grasp it, like the stillness before dawn, like the hush between words, like the breath you didn't know you were holding. I am still learning to empty my cup every day, and in doing so, I've found something more valuable than answers. I found presence.